Nier and Light Yagami are both in the end game now. Who is going to win? I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I want to talk about some manga that I read. Probably one of the last things I'll be talking about during the 2025 year on this channel. And today's story is all about notebooks and Shinigami. I am referring to Death Note Volume 11 by Tsugumi Ohba, which was published in 2007. I've talked about Tsugumi Ohba on this channel before, so I don't need to go into detail. Please refer to, Volume 1 of the Death Note series if you want more details about him. I've been exploring the Death Note series, been having a good time, and I'm very near to the end. I believe it's just, I'm talking about this one, then I'm going to move on to Volume 12, probably in 2026, early 2026, and that'll be that. I'll be able to reflect on it afterwards, and it should be a real hoot. I also, if you're just encountering this series, I strongly recommend that you go and read Volume 1 first. Volume 1 through 10 before you watch this video. Otherwise, it won't be as it won't make as much sense, I'll say. And it's a series that's worth exploring, so make sure you go and do that. But without further ado, let's talk about Volume 11. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Volume 11 picks up where Volume 10 left off. Nier is now returning to Japan, and Light has chosen a sort of disciple who he is using as basically a scapegoat if he needs to use it, and to throw people off his trail. And Nier contacts the Kira police squad, the Kira squad, and tells L that he is going to be returning to Japan, and Light says, you're more than welcome to, we're not going to stop you, but if you try to interfere in the investigation, it's not going to end well for you. And they're both kind of communicating, but the subtext is pretty clear. Nier is coming after Light, because Nier knows that Light is Kira, and Light is planning on killing Nier, so whoever catches the other person first will most likely win this sort of game that they're playing. And Nier begins to suspect there might in fact be a second Kira. Same as when there was Misa, which Nier knows Misa was the second Kira. But Nier needs to sort of figure things out first. Nier's agent, Lindner, is hired as one of Takada's bodyguards. So they have a person on the inside who is able to identify or able to hear some things. Now, Light knows that Lindner is probably one of Nier's agents, but can't do anything about it, because again, that would draw more attention to him. But just knowing about it kind of helps Light plan for things. And then Nier is watching a bunch of video about various people talking about Kira, and Nier begins to suspect that Teru Mikami, a person who has appeared on 2 different Kira programs, might in fact be the second Kira at this point, especially because in one instance Teru was asking God, Kira, for help on what to do next. So Teru is an interesting choice as a disciple, but not very smart. Definitely gonna get Light in some more trouble here. And then Takada invites Misa for dinner, and they sort of play a weird game themselves, where Misa knows that Light is investigating Takada, but Misa is also jealous that Light is spending time with Takada, and Takada is upset that Misa is close to Light as well. And Misa even announces that she's planning to announce their engagement at the upcoming New Year's party that's going to be on TV. And Takada says, you better watch out if you're rude to me, because I'm associated with Kira. One of Kira's followers might try to do harm to you, which Misa is too drunk to really care about that. Meanwhile, Nier has one of his agents follow Teru and sees him writing down some names in a notebook on a train, and somebody who's harassing a female passenger dies, and that agent is able to relay that information to Nier, and they're having Teru followed even more. And then Aizawa is beginning to get suspicious of Light, because he knows that Light is meeting with Takada, and he's saying one thing to her, but he also suspects that they might be communicating another way, which is in fact what Light is doing. And so he sneaks into the hotel room that she's staying at, and is able to figure out, yes, they have been writing on a notepad to one another, which leads Aizawa to fully believe that Light is in fact Kira. And he calls Nier about it and says, what are we going to do? And Nier's like, don't bother doing anything. This has to end between me and Light. If you try to do anything, it could affect the larger plan, which kind of upsets Aizawa, because he wants to stop Light from doing what it is that he's doing, and Nier is just kind of prolonging things a little bit. At the same time, Nier also kidnaps Mogi and Misa. And he tells Light about this, and says that he wants to keep Mogi and Misa off the board, so that nobody affects them, especially because he believes that Misa might have been the second Kira. And this also means that Light doesn't have access to Misa anymore, in case he needs to once again use her and treat her like garbage, as he's been doing. But Light has sort of planned for this. We see inside of his head there. And then the Nier also has one of his agents take a photo of the Death Note, because Teru goes to a gym, puts the book in a locker, but the agent has sort of broken into that, is viewing the Death Note, and they have evidence that Teru is one of the Kiras. But rather than taking the Death Note, they just take photos of it. And Nier is able to gather data about that. And they have to wait 23 days in order for them to figure out if the 23-day rule, or whatever it is, actually applies to this agent, which in fact the agent doesn't die, and so he's able to sort of develop his plans. We don't really see what exactly their plans are, but we're led to believe that they're all kind of working against each other at this point. And then finally, after those 23 days, Nier contacts the Kira squad and says, okay, I believe that L, or the person who is pretending to be L, is Kira. Let's meet so that we can prove your innocence, and I need you to bring the Death Note. And this will once and for all prove that you are Kira. Once we meet at a specific wharf in 3 days. And he specifically notes the date and time, which Light tries to relate to Teru through Takada. So they're agreeing to meet, and then Light tells Takada, who writes it down and is going to tell Teru. But at that point, I don't know if she tells him, or if like she's kidnapped first, but Mello shows up, throws a bunch of smoke grenades, kidnaps Takada, and then drives off for whether or not this throws a wrench into Light's work or not, or if Mello and Nier were actually working together, even though Nier says they weren't. That remains to be seen, but we will find out what happens as it ends there in volume 12. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about. Ohba is once again sort of talking about ego here, specifically how this is a fight of egos in this story. Ohba is really illustrating how this is precisely like a battle between Nier and Light, but rather than it being a battle for good versus evil, it's just a battle of them trying to prove who is best. That's really been the case since the beginning of this series, with the original L trying to prove that he can outsmart this Kira, and Light seeing L as an affront to his sort of supremacy, to his intelligence. And so it was a fight then, and now you have Nier and Mello in this, and ultimately if Light manages to kill Nier and prove that he's better, that satiates his ego, but it also firmly establishes Kira as the victor, which is what Light really wants. Like, you can argue that, he's, he's trying to prove the philosophy of Kira to be right, but deep down, there's something much more simpler at play. Like Light does not just simply want to be, like the victor. He doesn't want Kira to kind of rule as a god. He wants to be right. He wants to prove that he's better than somebody else. That's what Nier wants. That's what Mello wants. Even though they say they're fighting for good, like, it's very clear that it's mostly an ego-driven thing here. And I think Nier kind of points that out later in this in this particular volume. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Mr. Aizawa, I am sorry to say, but Kira doesn't even consider the task force a threat. You're not worth dealing with to him. He sees you as nothing but a bunch of flies buzzing around him, but he'll never be able to ignore me. That is because to Kira, I am his current opponent in the battle for pride between he and L, and the only way to stop Kira is for me to defeat him. And there you go, like the kind of philosophy there of what's taking place between Nier and Kira, Nier and Light, which Nier says to Aizawa. Aizawa wants to arrest Kira because it's very obvious that he is Kira, but Nier is like saying, no, the only way to really stop Kira is to defeat him, to prove that you're better than him, so that he becomes defeated and his ego is defeated as well, which is an interesting way of thinking about things. It kind of shows Ohba is talking about how this is more than just Kira ideology at play, as I've said before. Light is vain and maniacal, and this is every bit about as proving that his ego is right, proving that he is the top dog in this situation. Now you could argue, like, is Nier really better? Like, Nier proclaims to be better, Mello proclaims to be better, and the original L proclaimed to be better, but is that really the case? And I think they weren't murderers. They did a lot of real sketchy things at times, but they're not that bad. But at the same time, they're driven by ego too. Like, Mello and Nier have made this a competition for deciding who will capture Kira first. And it might be really simple. Like, all you need to do is just write Light's name in the death note, and that'll stop him from doing crimes. But and there's a question of if I do it, then I'm no better than Kira. But Light is killing thousands of people, and writing his name is going to stop that from happening. And philosophically speaking, that's a smart choice to do. Other people might disagree with that, but it's like the trolley problem, except with Light and Kira and all of that. But I think if Nier just wanted to stop Kira, he could easily do that. But he's driven by ego too, and so he's turning this into a game of trying to outsmart Kira, which I don't think is a sensitive option, or a sensible option, because again, he knows Light is obviously one of the Kiras. He knows that Teru Mikami is the second Kira. You take both of them out, you've solved this problem. And yet Nier refuses to do that. So again, it's very clear that this is an ego-driven thing, and these characters are heavily flawed for that reason. It's also interesting how Ohba continues to kind of portray Light as a god at this point. He has his worshippers, he has his schemes and his plans, which seem to counteract anything anyone plans against him. He has power over death, and he is in fact causing death. At one point, Ohba even shows Light literally orchestrating entire conversations. He's writing things on a notepad while being recorded so that the other person will say that, and then he says something in return. But he's facilitating that entire conversation. He's making that happen, creating reality around him. And if he defeats Nier, that'll just be how things go forward from here. I think that's a real sign, a real indicator that Light is becoming the god that he wants to be, if he hasn't already become that. But at the same time, Light is still a human being, and even though he's very smart, he might not be the smartest person in this entire situation. So there's the question of, is Light ignorant to the mess that he's in? Just because he has followers, just because he's able to use the Death Note and rely on others, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to overcome everything that Mello and Nier have thrown his way. There's a sense of hubris here. You aspire to be a god, and then you're struck down for trying to reach for the sun and getting burned. I'm mixing a lot of metaphors there, but it's very clear Light is reaching that godhood, but as everybody before him has tried to reach godhood, there's a lot of problems with that, and your hubris eventually gets the better of you. I'll also note that the downfall is very clear now. It feels like Light is walking into a trap because he claims to know an answer for everything that Nier is planning, but it also seems like we see a lot of Nier's sort of thought process. Nier has accounted for everything, some things that the original L didn't account for, and which in fact cost his life. And now he's scheduled for a meet to take place in an area where it wouldn't be easy for Light to sort of scheme or get access to external people. And so the question is Light walking into a trap? And if he's not, if he thinks that he can sort of plan for things with the help of Teru and maybe even Takada, then the bigger question is what Mello did at the end of this volume, is that chaos for both parties or just one? Does this prevent Light from getting access to Teru? Does this prevent Nier from succeeding in their plan because Mello just straight up kidnaps Takada? Is that going to affect anything going forward? And mostly I just think it's a problem for Light. This is going to be very bad, and I see this as a very much like an Ozymandias Breaking Bad type situation where, Light had all this power and all this sort of potential, but someone comes along who takes all that away, and now Light's sort of kingdom, Light's sort of empire is going to start falling all around him. If either he's going to get jailed or he's going to die. It's not looking good for him there. The one problem that I'll say with this particular volume is it does feel like it's all set up. You're sort of building up a lot here without any execution. It just feels like a volume that is just pieces being put into place for the final action, which would be volume 12. Less feels like it's happening than in volume 9 or volume 10. So it does feel like a weaker installment into this series and whatnot. And I understand why it needs to be done, because if you simply move from volume 10 to what'll happen in volume 12, there's not a lot of work that's being done. It'll feel too sudden. So you do need some of that setup. But I felt like maybe it could have been spread out a little bit more, or maybe you could have had more stuff happening here, especially with Mello. Mello just seems to disappear and then they return here, and it feels like there's not really a lot that they're really doing in this particular in this particular end game here. But again, that'll probably change in volume 12. It just feels a little bit slower, and this one can feel like a little bit more of a slog to get through. Anyway, those are my thoughts on volume 11 of the Death Note series. A lot of fun, definitely a very tense, very exciting series as we reach the end game. I highly recommend that you seek this out if you haven't already done so. I've been enjoying my adventure through the series, and I also picked this up from my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have some exciting manga out there. But yeah, if you've read this before, you simply want to say something that I said here, or say something about what I said, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this series or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Death Note related travels. Farewell.